Hello Abyss Dwellers and Weapon Masters. Skirk is the all-encompassing main DPS of Hydro and Cryo-only teams. In these comps, she can be used as either a main DPS that spams her normal attacks or a burst DPS that uses her elemental burst, then dips. She works best alongside units like Escoffier and Fiorina, but other Hydro and Cryo characters will do fine too, as well as Sucrose that's built to hyper-buff her. Skirk works best using Finale of Deep Galleries, though Mauricio say will be better if used as a main DPS with Fiorina. A normal main DPS stat lineup focusing on attack, damage percent, and crit will be superior to other options, though attack percent can be an upgrade to damage percent in some situations. For weapons, Finale of the Deep is a great starter option as it is craftable and only beaten out by the likes of certain 5-star crit swords with beneficial passives and her signature. Hi, I'm Aaron, and this is your Too Long Didn't Watch. If this is all the information you wanted, then I want to thank you for stopping by. But if you would like to support me, then you can take a bite out of that delectable kitchen sink cookie flavored subscribe button down below and or keep the video playing. That is up to you. For everyone still here, let's get on with Skirk, starting with her overview. Skirk is a pure on-field DPS unit that can be used as either a normal attacking main DPS or as an elemental burst DPS. Skirk's skill has two separate forms, one that lets you commit to her main DPS playstyle, with the other pushing her burst DPS playstyle. The tap version of her skill grants her 45 points of Serpent's Subtlety, and then she enters her main DPS state. In this state, her normal and charge attacks are infused with Cryo, and they have increased scaling values. Her hold version grants Skirk 45 points of Serpent Subtlety, and she gains a large movement speed boost. She can end this form at any point. Also, both forms grant her interruption resistance, and she will drain her Serpent's Subtlety points over time while in either form. Her elemental burst can do two things. Her primary burst is a large nuke that deals a ton of burst damage, but it requires 50 points of Serpent Subtlety. Every Serpent Subtlety point above 50 increases the damage dealt by her burst based on her attack. The max amount of points that this considers is 12. The other elemental burst is accessible while she is in her main DPS state, and it costs 0 Serpent Subtlety points. When used, she will gain a small amount of normal attack damage bonus. If she absorbed any void rifts, the next normal attack's damage bonus will be further increased based on the number of rifts absorbed. This effect is removed after her main DPS state ends or after it is triggered 10 times. Her first Ascension passive creates a void rift once per 2.5 seconds when a party member other than Skirk triggers a cryo-related reaction other than melt. Skirk can then absorb these rifts after she uses her hold skill, after using a charge attack in her main DPS state, or after using her elemental burst while in her main DPS state. Each rift will grant her 8 Serpent Subtlety points. For her Ascension 4 passive, Skirk will gain a stack of Death's Crossing for 20 seconds when a Cryo or Hydro character deals Cryo or Hydro damage. However, this only counts for when the character actively deals damage, so if against an enemy like the Hydro Tulpa, Skirk will never be able to get a stack from your Hydro characters. A max of 3 stacks can be obtained, and each party member can grant only 1 stack to Skirk. Each stack increases Skirk's normal attack and elemental burst's original damage by a low amount, but once at 3 stacks, this amount is increased dramatically. Finally, we have Skirk's passive that is always active. This passive increases the entire team's elemental skill talent level by 1 when all members in the party are of the Cryo and Hydro elements. Skirk's talent priority stands out due to her dual playstyles. At C0, her main DPS setup is generally more effective than her burst DPS one, so prioritize leveling her skill first since that impacts it most. Her burst is also worth investing in for the extra damage it offers her normal attacks and the huge burst damage it has. Level that after or alongside her skill. Her normal attacks, however, can be skipped entirely as they don't contribute much to her damage. This playstyle difference also changes her combos. As a main DPS, tap her skill, pop her burst to absorb rifts, and go into normal and charge attacks until the infusion ends. For burst DPS, just hold her skill to absorb rifts, then unleash her burst. That's it, simple and effective. Now that we've gone through her base kit, let's go through her constellations and see what they bring to the table. Her C1 allows her to summon a crystal blade, dealing a large chunk of charge attack damage whenever she absorbs a rift with no cooldown. This effect will trigger 3 times when Skirk goes on field, and then a few more times afterward if she's used as a main DPS. This new 1500 attack scaling nuke at the start of her on-field window is just absolutely absurd, and the fact that it can be triggered multiple times grants it the biggest power jump from C0 to C1 in the entire game. Moving on to C2, Skirk will gain 10 more Serpent Subtlety points after she uses her elemental skill. Additionally, she will gain a buff to each of her stances. If she is in her burst DPS stance, the max amount of Serpent Subtlety points that her elemental burst will consider will be increased from 12 to 22. If she is in her main DPS stance, she will gain a 60% attack bonus. The 60% attack buff is great as it buffs her main DPS playstyle and her C1, but the real kicker is the new 3,478.2% burst scaling that gets increased to 5,565% because of her Ascension 4 passive. What? This boost allows her to delete everything with 1.2 million HP or less. The 60% attack buff is good too, but does not compare to her burst, which is now a literal delete button, making it arguably her strongest playstyle at this point. C3 increases her elemental burst talent level by 3. While this doesn't do much for a main DPS Skirk, it cranks her elemental burst damage to the next level. With optimal buffs, she can now erase 1.4 million HP targets in a blink. Now, C4 buffs her Ascension 4 passive to also grant her attack percent based on the amount of deaths crossing stacks she has. This is actually incredibly powerful, as damage percent is about just as good as attack percent is for her. This means that at max potential, this buff will dramatically boost Skirk's damage to a level that we don't see in many 4th constellations. C5 gives a nice bump to her elemental skills talent level by 3. This is a powerful buff to her main DPS playstyle to make it more comparable to the absolute absurdity that is her burst damage playstyle. While her main DPS playstyle would have higher damage over time in general, the other is a 1.7 million AoE nuke that will immediately end a chamber. Finally, C6 will grant Skirk 1 stack for 15 seconds up to a max of 3 whenever she absorbs a rift. These stacks can be expelled in 3 ways. All stacks will be used when she uses her burst damage elemental burst, where it will deal a massive amount of cryo elemental burst damage per stack. When she deals normal attack damage in her main DPS state, a stack will be used to trigger 3 attacks, dealing cryo normal attack damage, and the final way for her to use her stacks is when she takes damage while in her main DPS state. Each time this occurs, she will consume a stack to reduce the damage taken by 80%, and then follow up with 3 attacks that deal cryo charged attack damage: 2,880% extra burst damage scaling, 2,295% extra normal attack scaling, or 1,350% extra charge attack scaling plus 80% damage mitigation. Yeah, that's pretty freaking good. These damage buffs are just ridiculous. She's easily nuking for 2.2 million damage. It's just so much damage that's complete overkill. The only enemies currently that this would be useful for are the local legends, since they would have huge health pools. Otherwise, this constellation is just complete overkill for both her burst DPS and main DPS playstyle. But this is just kind of a problem with her constellations overall. Skirk's constellations massively boost her personal damage, but they don't solve any core issue she has. At C0, her damage is solid. C1 and C5 power up her main DPS mode, C2 and C3 elevate her burst DPS, and the rest benefit both. The result, her damage scales from strong to comically broken, but that's all they do. These constellations don't erase her team building restrictions or add utility, they just make her better at what she already does. In many cases, you could achieve similar results by buffing her supports instead, who also benefit other units. So while her constellations are flashy, they're underwhelming in terms of value from a team synergy standpoint. But with her base kit done, let's move on to her best artifact options. Skirk's best in slot artifact set is her signature Finale of the Deep Galleries. This set offers Skirk a good 15% cryo damage bonus, plus either a 60% normal attack damage bonus or elemental burst damage bonus. This set is phenomenal for Skirk as it fits perfectly with her kit and even supports both of her playstyles. This set is her best in general because of these reasons, but it is surpassed by one when the effect can be activated. Her ratios say Hunter's 15% normal and charge attack damage buff plus 36% crit rate buff is unbelievably powerful. It's so powerful that it will be on par with or better than Finale of the Deep Galleries for both playstyles. The downside is that it completely relies on Furina for functionality. This could be considered a bad thing, but Furina is Skirk's second best support, so it is almost a given that they will be used with one another. It also happens to be in the same domain as Golden Troop, which is a great artifact option for both of Skirk's top supports, Escoffier and Furina. For main stats, Skirk often wants attack percent on the timepiece, damage percent on the goblet, and crit on the circlet. However, you can swap out the damage percent goblet for an attack percent one if it has better substats, or if you are using her with an artifact set, a weapon, and teammates that offer a lot of damage percent buffs. However, attack percent will be barely better at best, while damage percent will be stronger in most situations. For substats, Skirk only wants 3 stats: crit rate, crit damage, and attack. Critters are most important, so aim for an 80 to 160 crit rate to crit damage ratio at the minimum for her. But if you are planning to run her with a crit weapon or Marais Chaussee, then this will increase to 100 to 200 when in combat. After this ratio is settled, aim to balance crit damage with attack percent. On average, you should hope for about 2 to 10 attack percent substats, which should lead equate to between 1700 and 2800 attack total, depending on the weapon used. With artifacts over with, let's move on to weapon options. Skirk's best in slot is her signature sword, Azurlight. Like Mist Splitter, it boasts a high base attack and a low crit stat, but what sets it apart is its insane passive, stacking massive attack and bonus crit damage. These exclusive buffs, tailored specifically for Skirk, push it far beyond the competition, plus it synergizes with both of her playstyles, making it the clear top choice. Haran is a top-tier option for Skirk's main DPS setup, offering plenty of crit and a strong damage boost for her normal attacks. However, for burst DPS, it's a non-upgrade, great for sustained damage, but does nothing for her nukes. Jade Cutter is a strong pick for both of Skirk's playstyles, packing a huge crit rate stat and a hefty attack boost that scales with HP. But with Skirk's already high crit rate, it's easy to overcap, making it a bit inefficient without careful stat balancing. Mist Splitter brings high attack, crit damage, and bonus damage, but Skirk's best teams already stack tons of damage percent. As a result, it only shines outside of her optimal comps. In her best comps, it performs about the same as her top free-to-play option. Summit Shaper is a pretty good attack-focused weapon that works with both playstyles, but it really shines when paired with a shielder. With the right support, it becomes a significantly stronger option, but when without, it's just okay. Shiori's sword offers huge crit damage and a nice normal attack bonus, making it decent for Skirk's main DPS playstyle, but beyond that, it doesn't offer much and ends up only slightly better than her best free-to-play option, Finale of the Deep. Finale is Skirk's top free-to-play weapon in almost every scenario thanks to its massive attack boost. While the buff requires healing, that's no issue since her best supports are healers anyway. If you don't have any of the premium options, this craftable sword is the one to go for. Before we wrap up this section, there are two more weapons worth mentioning that can outperform Finale of the Deep, but only in specific situations. First up is Absolution. It offers a solid mix of crit damage and attack, which is great on paper, but not quite enough to beat Finale's raw output in most cases. That said, it does pull ahead in teams with lots of external base damage buffs or in more free-to-play friendly setups. Calamity of Ishu packs serious power, but only with the shield support to unlock its passive crit rate and damage percent to normal and charged attacks. While it does nothing for her burst DPS playstyle, when used with a shielder like Citlali or Dahlia, it becomes her third best weapon overall when used as a main DPS. Now, before mentioning team comps, it's time to mention what synergy Skirk has with our current cast of characters. Escoffier is first up, since she excels in the exact same teams that Skirk does. When there are only Hydro and Cryo characters on the team, Escoffier will provide Skirk with 55% resistance shred on her elemental skill, while also doubling as a defensive support. Skirk also buffs Escoffier due to her skill talent level passive, which would increase the damage that Escoffier would deal from off field. Then, because both are Cryo, they would offer each other Cryo Resonance's 15% crit rate bonus, increasing their damage even more. These two offer so much for each other that they were made to be together. Fiorina rounds out Skirk's ideal trio. She provides team-wide damage percent, Hydro application for freeze, and slots perfectly into Skirk's restrictive comps. Skirk in turn boosts her elemental skill damage, making Fiorina even stronger. On top of that, Escoffier enables Fiorina's buffs as a team-wide healer and shreds Hydro resistance, letting Fiorina maximize her damage. As a DPS herself, Escoffier heavily benefits from Fiorina's buff too. These three have such perfect synergy that they'll form one of the strongest core teams in the game, which will be quite evident in the team comp section. Skirk thrives as a main DPS in Hydro and Cryo only teams. These comps are where she will shine, as without them, she loses a lot of her power. When supported by her luxury supports though, she can deal insane damage, though without those top tier support units, she may struggle to stay viable. Another way to utilize Skirk's kit is using her as a burst DPS. This would be best alongside another DPS unit who would want to take on field time over her, like Nuvilette. Because of her large burst damage, she can be potentially better for her team's DPS than another support. This gives her another use case, which is good for such a restrictive character like herself. The last comp that Skirk can work well in is alongside Hyperbloom teams, since they deal enough damage despite her existence. These teams won't be her best in slot, but if you are free to play and don't have her top tier support options for her, then these will be her next best. But that is all she has. So with team comps finally over, let's end off the video with Skirk's rating. Skirk's damage is her standout feature. As a main DPS, she can hit insane numbers when properly buffed. While she may not reach Malwika level brokenness, she's still an absolute powerhouse, earning a solid 5 out of 5. But now onto Skirk's weaknesses, everything else. Skirk's elemental application ICD is the standard, but it is only applied on field with either a short window or single target focus. Plus her application is not even that impactful right now since the reaction she triggers is weak and her teams cover it anyway, so she earns 0.5 out of 5 here. For offensive utility, she has a pretty decent buff to her off-field elemental skill damage dealing party members. However, this buff is not that strong and will not increase the damage of her team by a significant portion, earning her a 0.5. For battery potential, she generates a solid 4 particles once per 15 seconds whenever she deals any cryo damage. This is pretty okay, however, these particles can only ever go to Skirk, who does not need the particles and is wasting them. How cool, 0.5 out of 5. For defensive utility, Skirk has some of the largest interruption resistance available in the game. While that is pretty awesome, it's not a great form of defensive utility, earning her another 0.5 out of 5. Skirk shines as a main DPS, but can also serve as a burst DPS while boosting the team's elemental skill talent level. Sounds great, right? The catch is she's locked to Hydro and Cryo only teams, not even just Freeze comps. This binds her to only 29 other characters, making her incredibly limited in team building, netting her a 0.5 out of 5 for flexibility and versatility. Overall, Skirk is a character that excels at increasing the DPS of Hydro and Cryo only teams. She could do practically nothing else other than the occasional meme build, earning her a 2.5 overall. This score is pretty high despite all of her restrictions, but that's just because she excels so much in the one role she was made for. Skirk is the DPS for Hydro and Cryo only teams. She does nothing else and she doesn't need to. While her restrictions do lead to some complications, with some of them being kind of major, there is technically nothing wrong with being the best pick in only one role. But that's all I have to say about Skirk. Now tell me your thoughts. What do you think of her? Do you intend to use her as a main DPS, or do you want to pair her alongside another unit for her to act as their burst DPS? Are you planning to try her in some funky team comp that's not Freeze? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. But with that, I will skedaddle. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye bye!